All right, guys, so here's the idea here. We've known Monte for years now. He is a character. He has some of the best stories we have ever heard. And as we're filming this tutorial, we're like, man, we're getting so much good information, but how can we get the Monte stories out?
Oh, man, but it's being lost at the bar.
Yeah, exactly. Every night we go out, Monte tells a story. So what we've done is we've built this nice little set here in Patrick's home. And it's already 10:30, and I have no idea how long we're going to go. But Monte has his favorite drink.
So this is a High West Rendezvous, which is, they actually mix two ryes. It's a 6-year rye and a 16-year-old rye. I was just being considerate
I'm not a big drinker,
Lee.
and I don't like whiskey anyway, so this is going to be great for me.
This is going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
Cheers, fellas, to a good tutorial and a good time. And
to story time.
And to story time. I was really fortunate. When I was 17 years old, I already knew what I wanted to be. I was in high school, I took a photo class, and now I had already early applied to go to business school. And when you early apply to a college, you know, the understanding is you're not going to apply anywhere else if you get accepted. So I did this, and all of a sudden, I take a photo class last semester of high school, and like, the hooks were in me. So I'm like, Dad, check this out. I don't need to go to business school. I'm going to go to art school. I'm going to be a photographer and stuff. And he's like,
let me guess. He was like, I'm so proud of you, son.
What was your dad's career?
And he says, My dad was a money room manager of the horse racetracks in Chicago. So he ran the money rooms and all the tellers and all the money that went in and out of all the racetracks in Chicago.
So photography as a career for him was off the radar.
Yeah, that wasn't really like...
a job.
It wasn't a job necessarily. So I'm like, Dad, yeah, I'm going to go to art school, man. I don't need to go to business school. And he just looks at me and says, I said, Dad, don't look at me like that. Like, check this out. I'm going to shoot for like magazines and stuff. I was all articulate at 17. And he says, son, let me tell you what you are going to do. I said, no, Dad, this isn't time for character. I have character. Just because you are a character, son, does not mean you have character. No. Dad, check this out. I'm going to go to art school. I don't need business. Like, I'm just going to take pictures and all these things. He's like, you know what you're going to do? You are going to go to business school. I'm like, Dad. He's like, for 1 year. Upon completion of that year, you can go anywhere in the country you want. I'm like, Dad, like, what the hell? Like,
was your dad in the witness protection program?
No. Yeah, and he used to wear that jacket. So he says, son, sometimes in life you have to do what you said you were going to do, even though you don't want to do it. I was like, fuck. So I went to business school. Well, at the time, I hated it. Like, I hated being there. Everybody there, I was like, these guys suck. I want to be at art school. I want to be a photographer. So I go begrudgingly, but it's crazy because I had already done some summer school and some like classes and all these kinds of things. So when I got there, I started actually taking business classes, not just like my English and my math, because I'd already cleared all those out the last like 2 years of high school. So all of a sudden I take these business classes, and now I run a for-profit business. And photographers are notoriously bad at business. And all of a sudden, it's one of those, I really apply these things. I apply the accounting class I take. I apply like marketing, all these things. And now it's like the best fucking thing I ever could have done was gone to this business school. Even though I hated every minute of being there, it actually sunk in what was going on. And so like every time that I like do a talk or something and my dad would be there, like he'd be up in the front row, I'd be like, yeah, I'd tell the story. And I'm like, yeah. And it worked out to be right. All of a sudden he's like, he's totally taking credit for like all my success. Like, that's right. It was me.
It's funny how that happens.
Yeah, right. Like he was like, I taught him everything he knows. Like, but it was great because getting some business acumen is something that every photographer should get. But, you know, most of the time we're just like in our heads about like taking the picture and like making stuff. And then like, what the hell do you do with that? So, you know, literally how I got into photography hopefully is something that everyone else gets the benefit while we're doing this shit.
No doubt.
You know?
No doubt.
So, yeah, I mean...
Can I pause right there? Can we get a little more smoke in here, Patrick?
A little more smoke?
Yeah, a little bit.
You guys look like you're on fire. All right, so we'll resume filming in 20 minutes when this dissipates. But really, it was one of the best decisions ever in my life to go to business school for a year, to mix it with what I do now. I mean, like really, it was such a good idea. But you know, also, you know, I find myself going to art school, and I had no idea I was moving to New York, like none whatsoever. Like it wasn't even like on my
What
radar.
college were you at?
A really shitty art college in Chicago that I'll never give credit for anything because they don't deserve it.
Okay.
So,
And so you were a freshman, you were 17, 18 years old?
yeah, I was, I went to business school for a year at a business school, and then I went to a shitty art college for 3.5
So
years.
you were like almost 20? Like
Yeah,
19, 20.
exactly. I was like 19 when I got out there. And so, like, you know, I'm there and I'm working behind the cage, like in the equipment cage, and I have no idea what being a photographer or being a photo assistant, any of that stuff is, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this dude who teaches there, and he's like, you know, do you want to photo assist me? And I was like, what's that? I had no idea. And he's like, well, you know, you would help me on shoots and like, you know, print in the dark room and these kinds of things. I was like, well, what do you pay? You know? Like, I don't know. I'm like just some like dumbass kid. And he's like $750. I was like, oh, you know, that's good. You know, I'm in. And
What was the minimum wage back then?
I don't even know if it was $750. He might have paid me $550. Like, I don't remember the number. I just remember I was like, yeah, okay. Like, it was like, that sounds about what I'm making now. Like,
Yeah.
sure. And so he was a photographer who was doing a whole lot of like kind of fine art stuff and some commercial stuff here and there. But primarily his work and what he was known for is hanging naked dudes upside down in gravity boots. And we were photographing on 8x10 cameras on 8x10 film, right? And then
So fine art.
yeah. Well, I mean, you know, when there's boobs in the photo,
Yeah,
it's fine art. When there's dicks in the photo, it's porn.
Yeah.
So, but we had like we're hanging dudes
But it was
upside
black
down.
and white, so it was
But
art.
it's all black and white,
It's
so
art
it brought
again.
us back to fine art.
Yeah.
That's why it was edgy.
Yeah.
So
You're hanging these dudes upside down.
for
You're,
like a year,
helping them
for
get
like a
in
year,
position.
I'm totally helping these guys get in position, helping them get down. How do you get down out of gravity boots? Yeah. So, and then, you know, I'd be hours on end in the dark room printing from 8x10 negatives, black and white prints, fine art prints of, you know, dicks. Like, how many dicks was that? A lot. Like, it's like one of my favorite Reservoir Dogs quotes. But when it really comes down to it, it's like, that's how I started into the photo business. I started in the photo business, literally printing pictures of naked dudes all the time, hanging naked dudes upside down all the time. Like, this was like what I did for like a year. And that was really my like entry into the photo business. Now, it was good. I met a girl in college, and I had no indication I was going to New York, like none whatsoever. Like it wasn't even on the table. And so we're on the subway. She's out like going to the airport because she's moving to New York to start graduate school at Columbia. And so she's like starts breaking up with me, like, yeah, you know, I don't think this is gonna work out. I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, no, we don't need to do this. And she's like, what are you talking about? I was like, because I'm moving to New York. She's like, what do you mean you're moving to New York? No, like, I'm moving to New York. Like, where you are is where I want to be. Dave Matthews, I think, stole from me later. And so she was like, you've never even told me this. I was like, yeah, I know, but that's what I'm doing. It's what's been my plan all along. If it weren't for her like trying to break up with me like on the subway that day, literally I could just be like drunk in the backyard at a barbecue in Chicago right now and have never done anything in photo. I could be working for like sanitation for all I know.
And now you're drunk here.
And now I'm working on getting drunk here with you guys. So literally,
Why am I drinking this faster than anyone?
You gotta slow down.
Yeah,
You gotta let
yeah.
the ice melt.
yeah. So literally, you guys can thank my ex-wife for
Oh, you
me being
married
here.
her.
Oh yeah, and the girl didn't work out, but the city did. Like anyone who ever asks me in an interview or something like, "What's your big break?" I was like, "Meeting my ex-wife." They're like, "Well, no. Like, what was your job?" I was like, "Literally, first job. None of that shit would have happened if I didn't
the
meet this
dicks-
girl."
The dicks, then your wife.
I don't think the dicks were leading to a career.
Oh, really?
Don't think so.
Really?
I'm just
Okay.
guessing. I'm just guessing because I know how bad that guy's career turned out. So.
So this is all leading to the big break in New York.
Yeah, that's all leading to the big break. I had started assisting some guys, and I had started interning for a photographer in Chicago who was legit. Like, he's one of like the great photographers in Chicago. His name's Sandro. He's awesome. And so something that happened to me, which was really great, was a photographer called Sandro's studio and asked them, like, hey, do you guys have any assistants that like we could use? You know, our work's kind of similar. I'm coming in from Boston. And Sandro's kind of like, I'm not sending my salaried guy. I pay him a salary. We'll send the intern. So he gives him my name. And I go and work with this photographer from Boston who is a major influence now on my life. He was an influence on my work. And it wasn't that he just taught me about photography. He taught me like a lot about what it was to be a man. His name's John Hewitt, and he's awesome. And so, you know, I do a job with him in Chicago, and it's great. Everything's awesome. I love his assistant. He's cool. So they come back. We do another job. And then they call me and say, hey, are you going to be in Chicago on, you know, June or January 31st? I'm like, no, I'm moving to New York, you know, in December. I'm like, oh, congratulations, that's great. They're like, well, hey, if you're moving there, when are you moving? I was like, next week. They're like, we have a job in like 2 weeks. So I get my first gig in Chicago, or I get my first gig in New York with Hewitt, all by happenstance. And I mean, I know nobody moving to New York except this girl. I mean, like, not a one. It's not like I even have like a name or a number to call. So I just went there going, I'm not gonna go off on my own unless I work with my idol. But you got to make some scratch, you know.
Yeah.
I moved there with $752. I moved there with $752 only because the guy I was interning for gave me a $700 bonus because he felt sorry for me because I was moving to New York with $52. Now, the reason I bring up John Hewitt is that job literally led to all the other assisting I did in my career early on. Like, he made my assisting career from like that day. And it was that we had another assistant on set. And afterwards I go with him and his buddy. We go smoke some pot. Well, he goes and smokes some pot. I just like had a beer. I don't really smoke. But we go, he's smoking some weed at another assistant's house. He gets a call from a new production company and he's not available for the gig. But he's like, hey, I know this great photographer who, he's like, hey, what's your pager number? I give him my pager number, he gives it to him, my pager goes off, I'm like, can I use your phone? You know, like, I call this production company back, and they're like, hey, we have a assistant gig, you know, you think you can come in, you know, we love working with that assistant, and, you know, you said you're recommended, and cool.
And you're calling from his number, so.
And so I go show up for the gig, and this production company's like, things changed. It was a one-day gig, but it's turned into an 11-day shoot. I was like, awesome. I'm thinking, I just got 11 days of work, which I did.
And what are you getting paid there? Is it
I was getting paid like $175. Like, I was getting paid
a
day. And I'm like, yeah, like, I will double my net worth. Right? Like, I will double my net worth on this job. And so I'm like, all right, great. I'm like, well, yeah, I'll just go home. I'll get some clothes. They're like, there's no time. I was like, all right. I was like, they just printed up some promotional T-shirts for the studio. He pulls up, counts out 11 shirts, he hands them to me. And I'm like, all right. And he's like, here's $20. Go get a toothbrush and like whatever you need. I was like, okay, cool. I run down, I get a toothbrush from like the deli. I run over to like TJ Maxx. I get like 10 pairs of underwear, a couple pairs of socks. I'm like, fuck it, that's all I need. I got some underwear, I got some socks, I got a toothbrush, I have 11 T-shirts, I'm in. What it turns out to be is that I'm driving a van and assisting a little-known photographer named Peter Lindbergh. When I say little-known photographer, he's one of the biggest names in fashion, like, ever. And here I am on a Nicole Miller gig with him for 11 days. We got on well. Everything went well. He ended up subsequently hiring me, like, you know, a handful of times whenever he came back through New York. The production studio's like, dude, like, you're willing. You're just willing. And that production studio fueled so much of my work for 3-4 years. Like, I was working for them all the time. That was literally how I was able to like live indoors and eat food in New York, is all because I met that one guy working for him in Chicago. He brought me in on one gig. I meet one assistant, and it was like.
But you were also a hardworking assistant.
Well, I mean, if you're not a hardworking assistant, all of this is moot. Like, yeah, any asshole walks in, you're like, yeah, I'm not hiring that guy again.
Well, I think a lot of people, you know, I've had so many bad assistants and just a couple of really, really good ones. And I used to assist a bunch of photographers, and at the time I thought I was really good. But looking back now, I was horrible.
Right.
So I think a lot of people, they just view assisting as a means to an end.
Right.
I'm going to learn what I can from you, and I'm going to go on. But those guys, even the people we know here that really work hard, sounds like what you're doing. Like, I got the T-shirts, I'm going to get the underwear, let's go. if you have that mentality, it definitely goes a long way. I mean,
oh yeah. I mean, anytime I tell anyone getting into this, getting into assisting, it's like half of it is being willing. I don't care if you know photography. I can teach you photography. I can't teach you to hang out with me and work hard.
Yep.
Like, I want to know those things when I'm hiring people. I want to know, like, if you had a shitty car, growing up, and like, yeah, my first car, well, when the lock stopped working, I had to figure out how to, you turn it left, lift the handle, turn it right, and then it opens. Like, all right, you figured that out? You're my kind of people. Like, you're going to figure out what we need to do on set. I'll teach you photography. One of my best assistants ever, he was a professional skateboarder, but he loved photography. And he was pleasantly persistent. He kept, hitting me up just gently, like, hey, man, if you need someone, like I said, I'm totally down all the time. I'm like, all right, cool. And he turned out to be one of my greatest assistants ever, for sure. Like, he rolled with me for years. He interned for me at first, and then, probably 6 years he worked for me. He's awesome. And it was that work ethic, it was that hustle that he had, and now he's a working photographer. And we all know assistants don't always go on. The numbers tell you you're not all going to push the button.
No.
It's just not going to happen.
Not all the best assistants do.
But it
seems that way.
It doesn't just take good photos. It takes the hustle. It takes the ambition. It takes not being socially awkward. All those things. He used to sell that same assistant. He used to sell pest control door to door. That's where he learned his people chops.
Rat poison?
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. Oh, and he had to go up, suss it out, figure out who someone was immediately. Being willing is half the battle. For everything. And that goes for being a photographer too. If you take great photos, but you're just kind of you're not going to go the extra mile sometimes. Someone else is passing you by. I will. I'll pass you by. I'll pass by anyone who's not willing to really put in the effort.
Yeah.
So you're working with Peter Lindbergh for how long before you make the next jump, or are you working with multiple people?
Well, I started working with multiple people. That equipment rental house and photo studio. They had a bunch of studios. They have equipment rental that they just started, and they're feeding me people through production all the time. So I'm working with everybody. In my assistant career, it went for 6 years that I carried other people's bags. I probably worked with, 150 different photographers at least, maybe more.
Really?
Oh man, and what was great is every time I'm on set, I'm sitting there looking around thinking if this were my shoot, what would I do here? Yeah, and I don't have to voice this to the photographer because they don't want to hear what the hell I have to say most of the time. Some people consider you a peer, but most people consider you someone who carries my stuff. But I would just sit there and I'd be looking around, I'd be watching things, be okay, if this was mine, I would do this. And for years, I sat there kind of mentally taking notes. I'd see a photographer do some jackass shit. I'm like, note to self, never do that.
Give us an example.
Oh, man. I remember there was one dude, and he would always shot with a 4x5 camera, and he was so slow in his process that I would sit there and watch his talent. I'd watch them while they were sitting there, and he wouldn't say anything to him, and it would just get awkward. And then after 15 minutes, they're kind of should I be here? And then he might say a word or something. Well, no, I just have to get this. And then it's more awkward. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. You don't let your talent sit there and just flounder. What I came to find, or what I applied in my photography from that guy, and he sucked. From that guy, I found that even if we're in the middle of doing something, we finish shooting something and then I have to look at something with my client, I say, all right, hang loose 1 second, we're going to look at this. If you need to, hang loose. If you need to get something to drink, whatever. We're looking here. I'll always be engaging with my talent and keep them engaged somehow, some way.
You acknowledge the process.
I acknowledge the process, but I'll never be sitting here for 40 minutes looking at images with my client while they're sitting around going well, I don't exactly know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
And we were shooting celebrities too, and I'm like, dude, what is wrong with you?
Did you engage them? Did you fill in the blank space?
I worked with them long enough that I was like, hey man, do you want me to talk to some of these people in that meantime? Yeah, that would be great. All right. So then I would just sit there and have conversations with Jeff Tweedy of Wilco and his wife. We're just sitting here bullshitting and talking, and all I'm doing is buying time while homie is I don't even know what he's doing. I don't know if you've ever worked with a 4x5 camera. It doesn't take 45 minutes to set up and figure it out. So by watching people do bad work, you can come home and do better work. I know when I left working every time with that photographer, and I'm saying like, this guy sucks. Every time I went home, I worked like into the night. And my lady at the time would be like, oh, hey, how was your day? I'm like, good. And I'm like right to the computer. And like 3 hours later, she's like, what are you doing? I was like, I worked with him today. And you know what? If this guy's working, I need to be working. What are you doing? Designing a promo. I got to get this out. Like, if he's working, I need to be working. That's bullshit. And it inspired me to go on and work harder at what I was doing. It kept me focused, kept me on track. And you know, at one talk, I had given advice to all these kids and all these people where I say, listen, you work for some shitty people, because what you see what you don't want to do is half of getting to what you do want to do. And I remember, like, you know, this producer was like, that's the worst advice ever. I was like, when have you ever carried bags? Like, I can tell you, this is the best advice ever. You get in a bad situation, take a look at what it is, figure out why you don't make that bad situation your situation when you're actually the one pushing the button.
So during this time when you're assisting all these people, are you also shooting jobs for yourself?
Not yet. At this point, when I'm assisting, I was shooting all the time. Now that production studio totally enabled everything, because they were like, hey, if you need a studio, anytime you can have it.
You had access to the gear, and you had the cameras and the lighting.
Exactly. Don't offer that to me. Like, that's like offering me to stay for dinner. Like, I don't even like feign like, oh no, that's okay. I'm like, hey, if you mean it, you better mean it, because I am going to show up. Like, I will stay, and I'm going to eat a lot. So I was literally shooting in those photo studios twice a week, 3 times a week. Like,
and who were you shooting? Were you just finding people in New York?
I was finding, well, I was already on the path of where I was like, I want to photograph athletes. Like, this was already it. So I would go around, I'd find basketball players down at like West 4th Street courts. You know, I went to a fencing club, asked some fencers if they wanted to come in, like shot them on an 8x10 camera, shot them on 4x5, shot them with the RZ. I didn't own any of those cameras. All of that came from the equipment house. That person who ran that equipment house, his name's Miguel Goodbar. I tell him all the time, and I say it all the time, and he's always like, no. I was like, he single-handedly enabled me to be a photographer. And he denies it, but I can guarantee while I was assisting and I didn't have any gear, he probably let me borrow $350,000, $400,000 worth of gear. Like, all the time. And it wasn't like, you know, I'm gear heavy. It's not like I go and I'm like, oh, can I have one pro photo pack? I'm like, Miguel, dude, can I get like 4 packs, 6 heads? Can I get the 4x5? Can I get this? Pocket was, he's like, sure, monkeys, of course. And, you know, part of that was, I say that he just gave it to me, but there was one day that 2 people called in sick of his equipment rental staff. Well, that's 2 of 3 people. They just started out. So it was just Miguel, and he's getting slammed. And so that studio manager of the studios who hired me that first time called me and said, hey man, you know, like our equipment. I was like, of course. I had never met Miguel. So I went out and I worked with him for one day. That one day of work earned me $400,000 worth of gear. And like a dear friend. He's one of my best friends in the world. Like, to this day, he denies it all the time that like he had any hand in like what I do. I was like, I couldn't do what I did. I couldn't have made all that work that looked like the stuff that I wanted to go get in the style I wanted without Miguel's help. So literally, it all came down to that one job with John Hewitt that like led into all these different possibilities for me. It's funny how much I can tie to him. And John also said, hey man, here's some photographers I've met in studios around the world. I don't really know them. I've just like met them and stuff. They seem nice. They got good work. And he gave me the number of like 3 photographers, and that was my referral going into New York. I hit those guys up, and they're like, oh man, I love John's work. It's great. You work with John, you must be good. That's how I started assisting in New York. Like, literally, that laid out like all the paths.
So who are you, when you were assisting in New York, who was like, you said you did this for 6 years. What was the next big guy that, you've talked about some people that you learned what not to do. I'm sure there's some photographers where you're like, oh my gosh, like I've got to take this guy's tricks and apply them to my work.
I was very fortunate to work for some really, really good photographers, some real heavy hitters, some guys who were doing great work. I mean, like, I learned so much from assisting. But as I said, when I moved to New York, I literally was like, there's one guy I will not go off on my own unless I work for him. His name's Albert Watson, and he is a legend. And I had no in. I had no, John didn't have an in. There wasn't anything that like lined up that said you're going to work for him. I'm like, I will not go off on my own until I work for this guy. Well, when I interned for that dude in Chicago that I had mentioned, Sandro, day one, he had a full-time salaried guy, the same guy they wouldn't send on John's shoot. So the first day as an intern, I roll in, and Sandro doesn't tell him I'm an intern, so I'm just like some kid who like shows up, and they have a camera suspended looking straight down on a tabletop, this 4x5 camera, and I walk up, and he's like looking at it to see if it's level. I kind of like, I look over, and I was like, hey man, what's going on? He goes, dude, you have big ears. Literally, that's how we introduced ourselves. And like I start laughing and we just got on. Like we're busting each other up and we just jived. Well, he became one of my great friends. And when I moved to New York a couple months later, I'm there 6-7 months. Everything's rolling because John hooked it up. The studio's hooking it up. Like the production company with them are hooking it up. Like I'm like, I cannot assist more. I mean, like I'm doing 4 or 5 days a week. So I call John. I'm like, dude, you have to get out here. That first assistant's name is John. I'm like, you got to get out here. He said, man, I don't know anybody. I'm like, you know me. It's going to be cool. Get the fuck out here. Like, now. I'm like, I'm working like 4 days a week. I need people. I'm always referring people. Like, why isn't it you? So he packs his bags and he moves to New York.
He just quits the other job?
Yeah, he was kind of like, man, I've been here like 4 years. Like, yeah, like,
Not going anywhere.
Yeah, and so he moves out to New York, and his name's John Vilius, and he is my main assistant now. He has been assisting me from when we were in Chicago, when I was doing shoots in Sandro's studios at night. And now, when he gets there and we're assistants, he's helping me then. He's been on 70% of all my shoots ever in my career. He's my first assistant now.
Wow.
And has been for the last 19 years. And that was the dude I met when I was an intern in Chicago. Like, and he's like, dude, you got big ears. I was like, I know. And it just, we hit it off. We brought him out. And now, you're asking, like, why are you talking about assistant when you asked me, like, what was your next, like, big thing? Well, John comes out. He's working for a little bit in New York. And then a dude he went to school with, Takeshi, was a Japanese assistant, and his visa was up. And he went to school with John, and he was Albert Watson's second assistant. So all of a sudden, he's like, dude, Takeshi's out. I was like, there's a position opening up at Albert's?
And you both wanted it.
I was like, dude, we got to get in. He's like, yeah, we got to get in, right? So John goes over to see like Takeshi, like, hey, just dropping in and see you. Hey, nice to meet you guys, yeah?
Feeling it out.
Yeah, and so their studio manager hires John to start packing up a whole bunch of stuff, a whole dark room and all these things to send to Albert Watson's home in Marrakesh. And she's like, do you know anybody? He's like, yeah, I know somebody. All of a sudden, I'm sitting there building these like 8-foot crates to put like huge enlargers in. Like, and we're driving box trucks out to JFK to the freight. And we crushed it. Of course we crushed it. Like, we were like willing to work day in, day out. Yeah, of course, we'll do anything. It doesn't matter. Like, yeah, $150? Yeah, we're in. Studio manager's like, you guys are great. We got a position opening up for the second assistant job. We both look at each other like,
what a coincidence.
So John and I, like in our heads, we're kind of like, like you take it. No, you take it. So we're talking about, I'm like, hey man, 'cause, he just came out of full time. He's like, I don't know if I want a full time anymore. I'm like, listen, right now, my freelance gig is like, I'm cruising. I have tons of work. I know you're starting to kind of get into it here. And like, I just started getting you some gigs, but I'm like, why don't you take the freelance, or why don't you take the full-time gig and hire me when they need a third assistant? He's like, sounds good. So he went and worked for Albert for a year. And working for Albert for a year, and how often do they have a third assistant? Oh, about 3 days a week.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
We were doing double days. We would do a shoot in Albert's studio and then rent the studio in the rental studio Industria next door we'd do a commercial shoot during the day. Never tell the client anything because I was over setting up the other one, and then we'd shoot another commercial shoot at the studio next door at night. He was banging two advertising jobs a day. Bam, bam, bam. Literally, I slept less that year than I have like in my entire life.
But you're in heaven. You're working for your idol, and you're working with your boy.
I'm working for my idol, and who's my buddy?
That's cool.
Vilius. We were working with some really cool talent, really cool celebrities. Like, I mean, they were big. Like, it was big stuff. It was big ads. And if you look at Albert's work, which you really should, if you don't know Albert's work, you should check it out. It's like, it's not that it's the most complex things. It's just elegantly handled. The light is beautiful. It is crafted. I mean, he is a master at light. When we talk about Greg Heisler and stuff, Greg is a master at light, but crafting a lot of lights or a scene, and a lot of photos of Albert's is a single light. But man, he can wield a single light. Like, to this day, I still emulate his work in some of my work. And I do a lot of my work with a single light because of my influence from him. One of the lessons that I learned in photography that literally established like my drive and my career happened in Albert's studio. He was doing a Santa Fe workshop, and at the time he wanted to do a big slide. He was doing a slideshow of all his work, but to do a slideshow, Albert's not taking 35mm slides. He's shooting 6x7 slides on the Mamiya RZ and then getting a Mamiya projector because he wants the better resolution of the images up on the screen. So John and my job is to re-photograph a whole bunch of his actual prints and work on the RZ and then make slides out of them and curate a retrospective of his work. So with this, we're going through his archives. He has probably 30 fireproof safes of his work. We're going through his archive, and I'm finding stuff that I had no idea he had ever done. But man, it's like, it could not be like another big celebrity or another like dignitary or like anything. It's like, we finish photographing like Mick Jagger stuff, then we do like Alfred Hitchcock, and then we do like the Queen of England, and then we do, and it's just like, it's like that. It's just like one after another, like. And so I asked Albert, I'm like, hey man, so you photograph like what? Like everybody? I was like, how do I compete with that? And he goes, hold on a second. And he runs upstairs. He lives upstairs. And he comes down with a Kodak yellow box. And it's like barely even that Kodak yellow anymore. It's like Kodak like faded yellow. And he opens it up and he lays out all this work. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And he said, this is all the work I did the first year I picked up a camera. My first year of film school. Like, he didn't go to photo school, he went to film school to go make movies. And he lays all this stuff out, and it's all this different stuff. It's like a still life of an alarm clock, and it's like shitty work. Like, you look at it, and there's this like model in like Sassoon jeans, and she's topless, and she's in like the kitchen, and she's like arching the back real hard and like looking this way. So he's in the kitchen because the bedsheet background is folded in squares but wasn't like steamed or anything like this. So it's just like, and it didn't quite make the floor, so it's about this far up and it just has shitty linoleum tile on the ground. And she's arching her back as hard as she can, and she's looking. It's Renee Russo as a 16-year-old model, trying to be a model doing a test shoot in Albert's kitchen, and it's bad. So I'm looking at these photos and I'm like, it's not computing with everything that I'm seeing that I've been like putting together for his retrospective. And he says, Monte, how old are you? I said, 24. He said, I was 29 when I picked up my first camera. He's like, you have a jump on me, and I've seen your work and it's good. He's like, all of this is attainable. It was like Albert Watson, mic drop. He walks away, and all of a sudden I'm getting goosebumps now, like right now, like thinking about that moment. I was like, I can do anything, and it's only on me to make that decision. And that literally what established the drive I had as a photographer. There was no way in the world I wasn't going to be a photographer at that point.